Oh, no, what? No, there aren't any more there, man. Oh, you got for the agenda. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our June 26th Portsmouth Town Council meeting. I just want to go through the emergency evacuation procedures in the event of an emergency. There are two exit doors to your left, another one in front of council chambers. We would exit the town hall, cross Middle Road and await for further instruction at the school administration building. If we could now all stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all. All right. Before we begin, I just want to touch base on some housekeeping. We are live streaming our council meeting. Those of you who are participating remotely via Zoom, there's an icon to raise your hand. If you are on your phone calling in, *6 will allow you to mute and unmute your phone. *9 will indicate you have a question. If you are participating remotely or in person tonight, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And now we will begin with our roll call.
Mr. Katzman.
Here.
Ms. Abbott. Here. Mr. Gleason.
Here.
Mr. Hamilton.
Here.
Mr. Levesque.
Here.
Dr. Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Aguirre.
Here. Okay. We'll get going here. First item is President's executive summary. Prior to our 7 o'clock meeting, we did have executive session at 6:30 under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A5. Was just any discussions or considerations related to the acquisition or lease of real property for public purposes or of the disposition of publicly held property wherein advanced public information would be detrimental to the interest of the public. No votes were taken in executive session. With that, we will move on to our consent agenda.
Move to approve as presented. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. I didn't, with a second.
Yes.
Len, okay. All right. I didn't hear who had the second. Sometimes I'm trying to be helpful. All right. Next we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. First item, it's a entertainment license. It's Newport Film, 174 Bellevue Avenue, Suite 314, Newport, for a film screening at Safe Harbor New England Boat Works, 1 Lagoon Road on July 27th from 6 to 10:30 p.m.
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Move to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners. Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Moving on, we have our town administrators report. Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. Since the approval of the town's provisional budget, the state legislature has passed and the governor has signed the Rhode Island state budget for fiscal year 24. Within it, state aid to the school department is increased by $96,116 over the governor's proposed budget, and that will be briefed tonight. The Rhode Island Department of Education has released a request for proposals for grants in support of the governor's Learn 365 RI initiative. I'm working with the school superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and their staff on preparation of our proposal, which is due at the end of the week. Since your approval of working with the Aquidneck Land Trust to establish a Glen Farms Trail, we have been working on a trail easement. A proposed agreement has been prepared and is under review by the Land Trust. Once the proposed agreement is ironed out, we will bring it to the council for final approval. Last week, Rear Admiral Peter Garvin relieved Naval War College President Rear Admiral Shoshana Chatfield. I attended the ceremony as Portsmouth's representative. The commanding officer of the Newport Naval Station will also be relieved on Friday, July 28th, and I'll represent Portsmouth at that change of command ceremony as well. I'm pleased to announce that the United States Department of Homeland Security through FEMA has awarded $38,133 in an assistance to firefighters grant to the Portsmouth Fire Department. This will be used for the acquisition of commercial appliances capable of cleaning and drying 6 sets of firefighting gear or PPE at a time. This is a substantial improvement over our existing facility, which is only capable of cleaning but not drying 2 sets of gear at a time. And then lastly, Town Hall will be closed next Tuesday in observance of the Independence Day federal holiday. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. You got to remember to go green here. Okay, moving on, resignations and appointments. First item is the resignation / removal of the Melville Park Committee for Miss Erin Felder.
Move to approve the removal. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next, it's the appointment, Bristol Ferry Town Common Committee. There are 6 vacancies. We do have 1 applicant, Miss Linda Moulton.
Move
Move to approve Ms. Moulton's application.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to old business. First item, it's the monthly finance report. Mr. Kirkpatrick.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. So as of the end of May, the town was 11 months or 92% through fiscal year 2023. Our year-to-date general fund revenues were at 93% of total budget, and year-to-date general fund expenditures were at 88% of total budget. Fourth quarter tax payments were the primary driver of the positive revenue figures, and discretionary spending is still frozen, tracking favorably through the fiscal year end. And we will continue to monitor both and respond as necessary. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. Any questions, comments, council?
Move to be approved as presented. Seconded.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, next item. It's final approval of the proposed fiscal year 24 budget. The budget is online, and as mentioned at the public hearing, there were a couple of items to be presented. Mr. Rayner, do you want to walk us through them?
Sure. Good evening again. If we go to the next, next slide. Yep. Okay, so as I stated earlier, the governor has signed the state legislature approved Rhode Island state budget. In that budget, again, the state school aid increased $96,116 from his proposed budget that was released in January. So the staff prepared changes to the provisionally approved budget in accordance with council direction at the public budget hearing a week and a half ago. So 1, we have a provisionally approved budget with the state approved school aid amounts, which would go to the school. 2, a budget which reduces the local appropriation to the school department by the increase in state school aid and increases the town capital reserve by the same amount. a third budget that increases the provisionally approved residential real estate and commercial tax rate by 2 cents and increases the local appropriation to the school department with that increased revenue. And then 4, a budget that incorporates both of those ideas in 2 and 3. So in other words, the increase in tax revenue would go to the school, but the appropriation of the school will be reduced by the amount of the increase in state aid. So if we can go to the next slide. So here are the changes that were made to state aid to schools with respect to Portsmouth. The final state budget increased the formula aid and the high cost special education aid to the school department. So as I stated, total aid increased a little over $96,000. Next slide, please. So the town budget was provisionally approved before the state legislature passed and the governor signed the final state budget, which increased that state school aid. This is reflected in the first column labeled provisionally approved budget. So you had a total budget of $71,431,755. The residential and commercial tax rates were provisionally approved at 12.782. You had made a motion and it was passed that the tangible tax rate would remain at the current year's tax rate of 15.651. And then everything else, obviously nothing changes. It's just what you provisionally approved. So if we go to the next column labeled provisionally approved budget with updated school aid, the increase in school aid increases the total school budget and therefore the total budget by $96,116. It's it's over $90,000 in revenue. It comes in as revenue and then it gets expended as school aid in the school budget. No other changes are reflected in the second column. So in other words, the approved tax rates, the levies, the school appropriation, and the capital reserve fund remain the same as what was provisionally approved. So the capital reserve fund remains at $75,000. The total school budget increases by the amount of increase in school aid to $45,931,160. The school appropriation remains the same, and obviously the school aid goes up. The third column is labeled the Keith Hamilton proposal. This reflects changes that would result if the proposal is passed to reduce the town appropriation to the school department by the increase in the amount of state school aid and increase the capital reserve fund line by the same amount. The tax rates, levies, and total school budget would remain unchanged from the provisionally approved budget. School aid would increase by $96,116. The town appropriation would decrease by $96,116, and the capital reserve fund would increase by $96,116. So you're just moving money from one line and putting it in another line. Everything else remains the same. And then in the third column, or fourth column, I'm sorry. Fourth column, this reflects the changes that would result if the proposal to increase the residential real estate and commercial tax rates by 2 cents. In this case, the total budget would increase to $71,618,835. This increase is the combination of the increase in state aid to the school department and the increase in revenue from the 2 cent increase. The residential real estate and commercial tax rates would increase to 12.802. And therefore the levies would also increase. So the levies on real estate and commercial would increase by about $93,000. The increased revenue and the increased school aid would both be included in the total school budget. And then the fourth column reflects the changes of both of those proposals, the proposal by Mr. Hamilton and the proposal by Mr. Levesque. So in that last column, did I say fourth column? Fifth column. Reflects the changes of both proposals. So here, the increase in revenue from the increase tax rate for real estate and commercial, that increase in revenue would be applied to the school budget, and the increased state school aid would be deducted from the town appropriation to the school and applied to the capital reserve fund. So those are the changes that would have happened to the budget. We have two ordinances ready to go, depending on how you decide tonight. So if you decide to keep the tax rate as it was provisionally approved, we have that ordinance ready to go, and then we have an ordinance ready to go if you decide to increase the residential and real estate and commercial tax rates by 2 cents.
Mr. Levesque.
Mr. Rayner, thank you very much. After listening to Mr. Hamilton's comments, I thought to myself, there is one kind of principle I have with budgets, is that you try to avoid ever using what appears to be a one-time revenue for operating expenses. There was no guarantee, I think, anywhere in the governor's or the state's final budget that we were going to continue to get that money. So looking at it that way, it meant that if in fact we took that money and appropriated for operating, we would have a hole in next year's budget that reflected the amount of money I was asking my colleagues here to present to the town, to the school. If, on the other hand, we take my proposal to increase the rate, which if some of you folks may recall, I think added up to on each taxpayer, the amount of $5 or $10 for the year, provided the school with the additional educational aid that, in sincerity, they need much more. But this was at least geared to a particular thing that I will address in a second. But that money would go there, and the additional funds from the state, which we have no guarantee would go back, would come forward again. Makes no sense, if you will, to add that to the school department. If you follow my proposal, makes every sense to take a one-time expenditure or take the one-time income and go against the expenditure that is the capital. So I am going to ask my colleagues to support. And Keith, this may be the only time the Hamilton Levesque proposal. You know, I mean, peace can be had. In the journal, excuse me, in the Boston Globe today, there was a editorial, pandemic learning loss. Why is it so hard for kids to get caught up? And if you recall, the zeroed out portion of the budget was from state or federal aid, excuse me, that was no longer going to be coming to help those kids. And nationally is recognized, those kids aren't catching up. Those kids have problems. And in particular, kids who had problems beforehand. And again, in the school department's budget, an account was essentially zeroed out. That was federal aid. Now, I don't want to pretend that I have any authority to tell the school department how it's going to spend this money, because we affected, I believe, the bottom line of the school department, and they are the ones that make educational decisions. But it would be my hope that they would apply these funds, if this council approved it, to those particular needs. And of course, next year, if they hadn't, there perhaps would be a discussion we would have. So, Mr. President, I see Mr. Hamilton has his lights on. Perhaps he wants to address this, but I am prepared to make a motion for the Hamilton Levesque proposal of 2023.
To be clear, if I may ask, you're talking about column 5.
But Len, your light's not on.
It's known popularly as the
Okay.
Hamilton Levesque proposal, I
Thank you.
believe. Column 5.
Okay.
Make sure.
Yep. Well, I have a couple questions before we go anywhere.
Sure.
One, when Mr. DiOrio was here last week or 2 weeks ago, he mentioned that some of the money, the extra money from the state was going to be for IDEA money, not specifically restricted funds. Is that true, or is this And it was more like $106,000.
Yeah, I believe Mr. Diro is online, I believe, if we wanted to engage him, but I believe that $96,116. We've gone back and forth on both the town and school side and agree that that is the increase.
Okay, so it's not restricted to a specific account or for,
I think it factors in everything that Mr. Diro had discussed last
Okay.
time.
perfect, thank you.
And just for the record, that was Dr. Kenworthy. Just some, for those who are keeping score.
And as for increasing taxes at this point in time, it really needs to be stated that the 2 cents, going from 1278, 1278.2, 1278 to 82 to 1282, 8802, excuse me. Those $5 and $10 increments are for a $250,000 house. So folks who own a $500,000 house, it's more 10 or 20. And I'll state it again, it's 10 or 20 this year, it's 10 or 20 the following year, it's 10 or 20 the year after that. Folks are already having a hard enough time keeping up with expenses because inflation is so high. The state is now, because they have passed this budget, are gonna add on another 3 cents to everybody's gallon of gas that they get in Rhode Island. So I think it's irresponsible of us to raise the taxes any more than we have to. I believe, and Mr. Levesque has correctly pointed out, we can't tell the school department what to do, but there are surplus funds on the school department side that can be used to help close the gap in learning loss that has been lost by the not removal, but the ending of the ESSER funds, which were the funds given by the federal government to help close the learning gap that was created by COVID. So I will not support raising taxes. I will support my proposal of bringing $96,616 back into the town's capital reserve fund.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whether to raise taxes or not in any given year on anything should always be justified on on addressing needs. And that's no less true now. And I can't speak for the school department's needs, so I'd like to hear from, I see the school committee chair is here.
Okay.
Let superintendent go first.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you. I'll wait to be officially summoned this time. Thank you. So thank you to all council members, Mr. Rayner, and all who work on the town side, as well as the citizens of Portsmouth for your continued support of the school department. I'm grateful for the financial support shown for us thus far in the 3.66% increase that was part of our provisional budget. As you know, this was a particularly challenging budget cycle for us, and we could have faced a potential reduction in state aid for FY24 of over $500,000 in the governor's initial proposal, which was mitigated by temporary measures, but still resulted in a loss of a little over $250,000. Our FY24 budget reduces 5 full-time positions over the current school year, including an interventionist. And we are fortunate to still have 1 more year of some ESSER funding to support programs this summer and some before and after school interventions in the upcoming school year to help with the pandemic-related learning loss. I understand that the General Assembly's budget recently signed by the governor will provide us with an additional $96,116 over what has been budgeted and approved thus far on the school and town side. And I also understand the desire to reduce the town allocation to the school department by that amount to provide relief to the Portsmouth taxpayers. However, as superintendent of the school department, I figured you would want to hear my thoughts. So in advocating for the school department, I would offer 2 additional suggestions for your consideration. Allowing us, number 1, allowing us to keep that additional money on the school department side to offset potential shortfalls in an increasingly volatile economic situation. Or 2, reduce our town allocation by that amount, but transfer the money into the newly established revolving capital fund for the school department. This would restrict that money for capital expenses and could potentially help to offset the contingency number that we are already looking to bolster to ensure we can complete all of the health and safety projects that were part of the 2021 bond. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kenworthy.
I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry.
Thank you for that information, and I apologize in advance because my way of understanding things is to repeat what you said and tell me if I got it wrong. So if I understood you correctly, you're fine with, you're suggesting that the differential increase in state funding be allocated to the school department in a, but in a reserve account for capital needs.
Correct.
That's not what I heard.
Well, I'm not done.
All right.
And
Just-
also having essentially zero effect by decreasing the town allocation to the otherwise operating fund of the school department, which sounds like you'd be getting less because the money that we're giving you to make it even can only be spent on certain things. Is that, do I understand what you're saying?
Well, the amount we would be going forward with is the amount that at this point we have moved forward with since the provisional approval of the budget. So while of course, in a perfect world, there are other things that we were looking to do. At this point, we have, made our plans for next school year.
So in terms of addressing needs, and look, we'd all like more money to be able to address town needs, school needs.
Mhm.
What I'm talking about is the plans for the school year that this budget will fund. The additional money that would come from raising the tax levy by 2 cents is this year not needed by the school department.
Again, while I would,
You indicated to us one that he could use the money if the needed thing.
All right. But let's,
I'm
Not okay.
trying to, well, I don't, okay, so maybe I rephrased it improperly, but what I did not hear you say is, please pass that. What I heard you say was, we all live within the constraints that we try to live within. You can live within the constraints of the current allocation, with the additional state funding being allocated to a school department capital account. And offsetting the town appropriation of the same, in the same amount.
yes,
That's what you're suggesting the school department.
we could live with that. Yes.
All right. Would the school committee chair care to add to that?
I'm gonna ask for more money.
Okay.
Hi, Emily Copeland, 25 Winstone Drive, Portsmouth, Rhode Island, Chair Portsmouth School Committee. First of all, I'd really like to thank the town council for recognizing it is a tough year, recognizing that Portsmouth as a district gets the second lowest amount of state aid per pupil other than Block Island. So, we really appreciate the 3.6% town allocation this year. It's higher than we've asked for anytime since I've been on the school committee. We usually keep it at 2, less than 2, but it was really needed this year. And Mr. Levesque, I'd really like to thank you in particular for being aware of the needs of, responding to the pandemic loss and really working on that. And our school department is doing all they can to allocate ESSER funding and all that to really help address that. I would say 2 things, and Dr. Kenworthy is very diplomatic, right? But one of the things that when I went and testified at the Hill that Portsmouth gets yelled at time and time again is that we underfund our schools given our capacity. And while I appreciate Mr. Hamilton's reducing the town allocation, that just compounds the problem as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if you were to give us that extra 96,100 to this year's budget, yes, it would raise the bottom line. I'm sure we could hire more interventionists and help with responses. That would be great, right? And it would help us going forward. But as you note, it would be not just this year. The bottom line would be higher next year. I totally get that, right? But we could use it, right? It seems to me we have a real opportunity this year, in the sense that that 96,000 could either, as Mr. Katzman was mentioning and Dr. Kenworthy was mentioning, still be put to use to help the schools by putting it in the capital account. As Mr. Aguirre is well aware, you know, we're working on these bond projects and there's been a lot of inflation and costs, and we're really working as hard as we can to keep that down, but it's going to be very tight. And so that is a way in which it could really help the schools. And that's what the state allocated that extra money to do. I mean, the governor's idea was that this is helping schools transition to lower money. So I'm assuming next year we're going to face another $250,000 cut. So I would say, I would argue that hopefully you would consider either just giving us the $96,116 to our annual operating budget and letting us do some more. Do we have to have it? Is it a crisis? No, but it would be really nice. And that would also mean not having to raise the tax rate. And Mr. Levesque, I really appreciate that, because we probably will be coming back at some point and saying we have to have every penny, right? Or at a minimum, then putting that state aid into the capital revolving account. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Gold. Any questions?
Yeah, I just want to make a clarification on my proposal does not lower the tax rate that is preset at the provisional level.
Correct.
Just transfers the money from the school department maintenance of effort funds back to the town. So that if the school does come to a problem at the end of the year and they're running a little short, we still have that money allocated within the overall town budget that could be transferred to the school system if need be.
True.
So
But it could also go and help build the capital revolving fund. And it would reduce the 3.6% town allocation.
it would not.
But if you're,
Only if we move it from the school department budget, which then moves it into the town budget. It would lower your ask of town taxpayer money.
which is what you're suggesting for
That
moving
is
it.
what I'm suggesting.
Right. And what I'm saying is that then that keeps, when we're looking at it from the state perspective, they keep saying, well, Portsmouth could be doing more to support the schools.
Yeah, well,
But-
listen, we both know the state funding formula is a complete mess.
I
And- and
no debate
It
there.
needs to be overhauled 100%, and some of the reasons they give up there are just totally ridiculous. So we won't even start with the General Assembly and how they add.
Nice editorial. I totally disagree with you, but nice editorial.
All right, did you have a comment, Mr. Gleason? Okay, all right. Any further questions at this point from council? Okay. Mr. Grieve?
Tom Grieve, 110 Thayer Drive. It's true, you cannot tell the school how to spend the money they get. However, you can determine the conditions under which they get it. It's about time the council demanded results for the money that they give. I suggest that you set conditions in order to give this money to the revolving fund. I would suggest the condition is that we had one school last year that did not meet standards. If that school meets standards this year, that money will be transferred to the revolving fund. If not, it doesn't get there. That's the way to ensure results for the money we're spending. And I think that's a reasonable way to attack this problem. If the school spends money and gets results, returning that school to the standards that it deserves to be at, to get the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grieve. Questions or comments from councilors? Mr. Gleason?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick crunch on the numbers you had up there. It looks like using the 2-cent Levesque method would add $93,474. That sound about right to the
That sounds about right.
additional money?
Yep.
Okay. So we've got, first off, thank you, Governor, for the $96,000 with General Assembly, excuse me. Governor, shame on you. I would be curious to hear what the school department thinks about, putting that type of stipulation on earning that money. Is that a doable kind of thing, or is that your consideration?
If you want.
Uh,
That's a, that's a.
I'd
that's
ha-
a-
It's a loaded
Yeah,
question.
no,
Yeah,
no,
no, no,
that's a,
David Lynn.
yeah.
I'm not completely sure what Mr. Grebe was referring to. There are a number of different metrics out there. So I'd have to look at the exact, which school, which metrics, as everyone knows, we're always looking to improve upon things in Portsmouth, but I think we put out a very good product. And we, as well as every district in the state, is still trying to, get back to or exceeding where we were prior to the pandemic. So I think it would be tough to put those kind of stipulations on a request like this because the assessments have already been taken at this point. When we get those results, typically in the fall, it's measuring what's taken place here this past spring. So we're talking about the budget right now and the money that one way or another we know that we're going to need to support our schools next year.
Thank you, Doctor. You answered my question about as best it can be expected. Myself, I guess what I would like to see or would consider is the thought of putting the money, $96,116 into a capital reserve budget and not adding the 2 cents to the tax rate, in my personal view. Letting the school spend that money.
Anyone else wants to talk? I've already spoken. Okay.
Well,
Thank you, Mr.
Did
President.
you have a comment?
I have no qualms with putting the funds in a capital reserve account.
Except that doesn't have to help the kids this year.
Well, it
That
does.
might help the building, but it doesn't help the kids.
Here's,
It's not going
here's.
into operating, so it really doesn't
Understood,
have any
understood.
effect
So
on what the kids
By
might
putting it
need.
into a capital reserve fund, well, what I'm saying is it should be in a capital reserve fund on the school department budget, on the school department side. Because the funds were allocated by General Assembly for school department use. And I know we'd hold it, if they needed to give it to them, but I don't think that honors the spirit of the allocation from the state, as much as I know the state wouldn't necessarily honor our spirit of things, but I think we should honor that the funds were allocated to the school department, they should, by the state, they should go to the school department. And by putting it in the by putting it in a capital account, it does address needs that they know they will have to address going forward this year, given the higher costs for things that they were obligated to do under the bond, construction bonds that cost more now than when that bond, than when they went out for bond. And I don't support raising the taxes by 2 cents, Mr. Levesque, and I apologize for that. I know you really want that, but I have.
No, I
to-
don't really want it.
Well, no,
I
you
think it's a
support it.
responsible thing to do.
I understand.
And
that-
if Mr. Hampton
If I
is
may
right,
All right,
finish.
double the
let's
thing.
just do it one at a time.
$20.
And if
okay.
I may finish.
Yeah, let's let,
Oh, you addressed me.
I did, and if I may finish my thought and then have your say, is, I try to be as precise with my words as I can, and I am not always as precise as I would like to be. So I certainly didn't mean any denigration of your proposal, Mr. Levesque. What I meant was I believe it is responsible to fund the school department appropriately. And not to, brush off my bona fides of being a school department supporter. I voted for a budget that increased the school department budget by, what was it, 13%?
No.
14%? Back in 2006. Was way over the cap. But that's what the school department that year said was needed to address shortfalls that had been accumulating over years. We had a tent meeting in this town because of it. We had a lawsuit, a Carullo suit in this town because of it. And the court restored nearly all of the money that was cut. at the tent meeting. So the majority of the money was restored, proving that something more over the cap was needed that year. I don't see these circumstances being the same this year. I don't hear the school department saying, if you don't give us that extra 2 cents, we're in a crisis this year. I'm more than willing to fund the school department responsibly when they say they have needs. And I just, they came to us in April with a budget. And I don't see it being articulated by representatives of the school committee tonight that that's a necessity. And so I'm not going to support that. I would support accepting, not making any changes to the town allocation. So there'll be no tax increase from what we've been discussing. No change to the rate. And the Delta additional state aid then was in our numbers when we were guessing what that state aid might be. We put in a capital reserve fund on the school department side of the accounts.
The only issue with that is if you leave it on a school department side and you leave the 96,000, that provides a larger jumping off point for next year. And the
Larger
maintenance
jumping off point for
for the school department's ask for the town.
but our
so the maintenance-
allocation is not changing.
Our allocation would change if we move the $96,116 into the town's capital reserve fund.
Or if the state doesn't come through with the 100,000 next
The
year.
state's not going to come through with it. The
So-
reality is they are going to cut a budget. They're not.
Are you doing, oh,
No.
God, tell me what my future is like.
Okay, let's just try to
My
stay on
recommendation
point.
is to move it over and
Right.
if it's needed in the school side. And I'll be perfectly honest with you and all the citizens here. $96,000 is not going to fill many holes in terms of inflation of what we bonded for and what is really needed in the schools. It's unfortunate. It's the same situation we found with the police department. We bonded for X and you need Y. We bonded for X with the schools and we're gonna need Z to really get everything done that needs to be done. You're gonna see things happening this year. You're gonna see things happening next year, but it might not be everything
Mm.
because inflation is just so ridiculous right now. So moving the 96 over into, it allows us as the council to manage that money where it might also be needed. We have proposals later on tonight because fire truck is more expensive. We need 2 more police cars. If,
Those are coming from capital though.
right, it's a capital project we set up last year. But if we have another hydroplane and lose another police car, maybe we have to buy another one in an emergency. You just don't know. But if that money is already allocated over to the school department, we can't use it. You know, we've had a very good working relationship over the years with the school department. Heck, even one year there was a huge surplus and they gave it back to the town. And we got yelled at by the state
Right.
for working together, God forbid. My proposal, again, doesn't lower the taxes. It allows, even on the town side, for budgetary items that may come in, whether it be capital or other items, but it gives the town the flexibility. If the school department came back and said, hey, we had a boiler blow up, we need $70,000 to replace that boiler. We have that money and we can do
It's
that.
not coming from our operating budget. We
That's
would
right.
never do that
No, no,
for a school department. Can I just,
Why wouldn't we?
I'm sorry.
If it rains, the town pays for it.
We,
The school does have a capital reserve fund on their own already. They have a surplus and they probably would, but it could happen. It just, the maintenance of effort is if we give the school department 37,287,545 this year, we have to give them at least that next year. And we know it's going to be more than that. It's never been less. Our schools have declining population. Things are getting more expensive. When you have that jumping off point, I just think if it's a $96,116 less, it is less of a burden on the taxpayers in Portsmouth. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Danielle.
Ms. Abbott.
I have to agree with Mr. Hamilton on this one with letters in column number 3. I think, we'd love to give the school department 96,000 more dollars, but we discussed and reviewed and approved the budget that was requested. And I think that there's a lot of things across the entire town in and out of the school that would be nice. And I think putting it in the capital reserve fund gives us the most flexibility to make decisions on the fly. It might not fix our inflation problems, but yes, it could let us deal with some emergencies. It's $96,000 is a pretty good chunk to use as a match for grants to be able to do even bigger things. So I'm gonna have to support Mr. Hamilton's proposal of reducing the school appropriation by the same amount and moving the money into the capital reserve fund
For the school or for us?
for us.
Okay.
And so we have the flexibility to decide what the best and greatest use of that money is over the next year.
Okay. Great.
I am confused.
Okay, let's try to get it.
Yeah, no,
Well,
The-
we're
the
gonna-
hold on, let's-
reason I-
count to four already against. For Hamilton, the proposal.
well, no,
I'm
not
really-
necessarily, because I am confused. I'm not supporting Mr. Hamilton's motion either. Because, well, your proposal from a couple of weeks ago, I am uncomfortable with the idea of reducing the school department budget by the allocation that we've already agreed to. give.
No,
We're
we're
not.
not reducing the school department's budget. You're reducing the school department's town allocation by the amount extra given by the state.
We're,
So the amount coming from Portsmouth taxpayers, even though we can make an argument that the state money comes from Portsmouth taxpayers too. But the money coming from Portsmouth taxpayers would be reduced by 96,116.
Hmm.
There's multiple reasons. I could go,
So that is their operating budget.
it's not their operating budget, it's their money that is, it's a
Fair.
local
Fair
appropriation
enough.
coming from the town.
Understood.
The operating budget is multifaceted,
Sure.
and money comes from everywhere. So their budget does not change. Their overall budget is still gonna be 45,295,044. That
So
doesn't
is-
change.
That is less than what was provisionally approved.
No, it is not.
no, no, sir.
Column 3 is less than column. 2.
Not, the total school budget is not less,
Oh, sorry. The total.
just
school
the
budget.
amount of money coming from Portsmouth taxpayers directly.
In
total
amount, the allocation under the budget to the school department has
Mark,
changed.
Mark.
Sorry. The allocation to the school department under the budget has not changed. It's
Got
just
it.
that $95,000 of it is coming through a grant from the legislature, not from our tax levy.
So in a sense, no change to anything on the provisional budget, other than taking additional unaccounted for previously state money and putting it in a reserve account.
So when
But if I may, it's 96,000, think of it as revenue.
Mhm.
It's state aid, it's just additional $96,116 in revenue. That revenue has been earmarked by the state, obviously, as school aid.
Mhm.
So the only difference between column 1, which you provisionally approved, and the other two next two columns, 2 and 3, is where that $96,116 goes.
Understood.
And as Miss Abbott was talking, other things popped in my head as to reasons why it's better off on the town side. Not that I'm wishing this on Portsmouth or us in the Northeast in general, but we haven't gotten hit by a storm in a while, and I'm a little nervous,
You can
That-
jinx it.
right? That it could be a hurricane or a tropical storm, and having a little extra money on the town side would be helpful as a buffer.
If I may ask,
And I'm knock on wood. that
Or,
doesn't happen.
or I don't know if you could answer the question is because I haven't looked at the actual state legislation and budget, are we free to take that state aid to schools and put it on?
We're not
No,
taking the
no,
state
you're
aid.
not, the
We're
state
just not
aid-
giving the extra money from the town appropriation.
Yeah, so
The revenue to the school is coming in from the state. We're reducing the amount of money from the town.
So
going to the
they're getting,
schools.
if you will, state money no matter what we do.
Right, correct. It,
I
it's a shell
understand.
game,
I understand.
The money
But what
has,
you're doing
or
is you're
musical
taking-
chairs, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah, the money goes to-
96,000 piece of shell. from
Right.
the school side.
yeah,
putting it
the
down
money
on
goes to
our
the
side.
school department because it's earmarked for the school
Okay.
department. We're just reducing the amount in our levy.
Thank you. I'm sorry to be so dense, but.
That's okay.
And it allows us, we'll be starting next year's budget, or I should say, Mr. Rain will be starting next year's budget negotiations using this year as a floor, instead of a floor that's $96,000 higher. Plus, we have the flexibility to use that money that the state's giving us, which who knows, may wind up going to the schools. I don't know, just.
Not exactly though.
No, not
Because
exactly.
the town appropriation will be where it is right now. The school will be spending this money that it got from the state. If the state does not give the money next year, then we have that hole.
We would have to make it up.
Right.
That's right.
If I may, Mr. President, I'm sorry, I don't run the place.
Sorry, I just was going to make 2 points. One, just remember that capital does not count toward maintenance of effort. So if you put the 96.1 into the school's capital, that does not change the town's maintenance of effort in any way. Two, I was going to make the point you just made, and that is, remember, the intent of this extra money is to help ease the transition from less and less state aid going to the schools. It's not just a Portsmouth thing. We've got it more than other towns do, but it's across the state in some ways. So if you reduce it this year, then next year we'll be back and we may be saying, hey, we need to go to 4% next year. So again, it's your choice what to do with it. I'm just saying it may then create a bigger need ask from the town next year.
Thank you, Ms. Copeland.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I think Mr. Hamilton still has his light on. Are you looking for?
I-
recognition?
Yeah.
Had I woken up yesterday, this conversation might have been somewhat more interesting. And by the way, I know how to count.
Hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's 5-2 at best right now for anything other than a hybrid Hamilton. I like that phrase. First, Mr. Grieve, you can't do a budget where you're gonna turn over the money at the last second. I mean, we do that kind of with the fire department and some of the, where they might want to go out and get ladders or hose or something like that. We can hold the money until the last second to see how the rest of the year went. We're talking an operating budget. When you do an operating budget, you may have an emergency. As Mr. Hamilton suggests, with an operating budget, you can't come in and fix things at the end of the year. You actually do it. Putting money into a capital account does not affect, and keep in mind, for the most part, in the past, the school department was only an operating budget. Right? And it does go up all the time because it is about 90% personnel. It does not have the debt service, which tends to be an anti-inflationary assist for the town council. Too long to explain, but I think you do know this, Mr. Hamilton. So I remember back in the day when Mario Manfredi was the superintendent, and I actually went to a dinner honoring him upon his retirement, and I said he only lied to us when he had to. And every year he used to come in about this point and come in and say, hey, you know, you guys all did my budget and everything like that, but we have 2 or 3 special needs students coming into the district. We did not anticipate we need another $125,000. And that was fine with me, whether he had new special ed kids or not. Because quite frankly, I knew we were always pretty much bare boning the school department budget. And Mr. Catherine, what you referred to was a period of time in which they scavenged the school department budget and it needed to get back. Now, when you talk about the allocation for this year, remember, we bump up to the 4% cap. So if we have not reached that cap on our levy, next year, we are still below. We are dealing with the amount of money we took. So it's 4% is the cap on that, not how much money a town has, but the amount of money we appropriated the previous year. People talking about, and I'm not unsympathetic. A good friend of mine that I've known almost all my life is on the tax roll, along with 6 other people. And actually 2 of them are estates. Okay, so probably going to get off the tax roll. So the thing about it is, we have always been accommodating. We have worked with people. We have, I can't remember the last time we actually went and had a tax sale. We might have been last week, but I can't remember. All right. We have kids in need. The truth is, and by the way, one last thing, Mr. Hamilton. When I used to go up to Providence, sometimes they found what I said funny. Most of the time they thought it was absurd. You're coming from a town with polo, for crying out loud. And I'm coming from a town where somebody just got shot in Silver Lake. I mean, I had a guy tell me, I said, you know, my property taxes are like $3,000. He goes, I pay more for my car than that. For us to compare ourselves to particularly the urban ring is ridiculous. It just is ridiculous. All right. We actually tend to succeed for 2 reasons. We have a very good populace that support each other in the school system, and we have a great school system. That's why we do well. That's why we have kids going to major colleges all over and kids finding success in other places. All right. These kids, if they're not successful, that's the other side I used to see. And I'm on a organization that helps people get out of the ACI and re-entry. And I will tell you, probably about 80% of those people have undiagnosed learning disabilities that eventually came into drug addiction, other problems, or something like that. Pay now, or you pay a hell of a lot more later. So that's my little editorial. All right. I thank you for your consideration. And I think I know where the vote's going, and so I will be watching with piqued interest.
Thank you, Mr. Levesque.
I do have one more question.
Okay.
If, and I don't think there's a proposal necessarily to do this, I'll make a motion to do it. If we were to do nothing other than adopt formally, finally, what was approved as our provisional budget, what would happen? In other words, there's a state aid that's not reflected in that.
Correct, but we would still get that state aid.
Right.
That does affect the total budget. It would go to the schools, so the total school budget would increase by the $96,116.
It would essentially be column 2, but without us necessarily taking action to be that.
Yeah, but I would only say that it wouldn't be the most proper thing in the world to pass the provisional budget as your final approved budget right now, knowing that there is
Right.
additional revenue coming to town.
Thank you.
All right. So I do want to,
Mr. President, just one, but if we did 2, that is your budget that reflects the increase in the state aid and no other activity.
Correct.
All right.
all right,
Mr. President,
yes.
I will make a motion, which will probably be defeated, that we adopt column 2 as our budget, the provisional budget with the updated school aid.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the provisional budget with updated school aid. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So the motion fails 5-2.
And Mr. President, you need to say who
I know. So the two in favor were Mr. Casman, Melissa Beck, and the opposed were Dr. Ryan, myself, Ms. Abbott, Mr. Gleason, Mr. Hamilton.
Mr. President, I would make a motion that we reduce the school department town appropriation by $96,116,
Second.
which is option number 3 on the spreadsheet in front of us.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No. Mr. Levesque voted no.
And Mr. Pat.
Mr. Castle. Okay, so you have that, Jen? Okay, all right. So that's only the first part of this. So now we have our approved budget. Now we have to do the budget ordinance.
This is the town clerk's favorite night.
Yeah.
Actually,
No, you have to do the
final approval.
final approval, then my lucky part.
And I might suggest that Ms. Abbott let you borrow one of her cough drops. Once you get done. She said, yes. So I would make a motion that we adopt the final town budget. As amended with the previous motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Now, we have the budget ordinance. Come off me.
Okay, all right. An ordinance relating to the levy and collection of taxes, number 2023-06-26. Be it ordained that the town council of the town of Portsmouth at a regular town council meeting legally assembled on the 26th day of June, 2023, hereby levies and orders the collection of 1, a property tax on the rateable real estate and tangible personal property, said levy to be based on the assessment made as of the 31st day of December 2022, as subsequently adjusted for the new construction or damaged or destroyed buildings according to law. Total taxes prior to any adjustments for subsequent increases or decreases in assessments shall be in the sum not more than $61,904,267.
Million.
Said tax is for ordinary expenses and charges for the payment of interest and indebtedness in whole or in part of said town, for the payment of the town portion of the state tax, and for other purposes as specified in the budget and warrant items approved at this meeting as authorized by law. The said property tax shall be apportioned upon 100% of the assessed valuation as determined by the tax assessor on the 31st day of December 2022 at 12 o'clock midnight, according to law. Any subsequent adjustments to the assessed valuation shall be apportioned on a pro rata basis during the calendar year, according to law. The above amount shall be exclusive of veterans exemptions and those for the elderly as provided by law at the time tax rolls are certified. The maximum gross property tax levy of $61,904,267 does not exceed the 4% tax levy cap. The fiscal year 2024 tax levies have excluded motor vehicle excise tax for the purpose of determining tax levy growth pursuant to Article 11 of the 2017 H5175 sub A as amended. The tax assessor shall, upon completion of said assessment, date, certify, and sign the same and deliver to the to and deposit the same in the office of the town clerk. The town clerk, on receipt of said assessment, shall forthwith make a copy of the same and deliver it to the finance director in their capacity as treasurer, who shall forthwith issue and affix a said copy of a warrant under their hand directed to the tax collector, the collector of taxes of said town, commanding them to proceed and collect said taxes of the persons and estates liable therefore. Said taxes shall be due and payable on and between the first day of July and the first day of September 2023, and all taxes remaining unpaid on said first day of September 2023 shall carry until collected a penalty of 12% per annum upon the real estate and tangible personal property. Said taxes may be paid in 4 installments. The first installment to be 25% on or before the first day of September 2023. The remaining installments as follows: 25% on the first day of December 2023, 25% on the first day of March 2024, 25% on the first day of June 2024. A grace period of 7 business days will be extended for each installment period. Each installment of taxes, if paid on or before the last day of each installment period successively and in order, shall be free from any charge for interest. If the first installment or any succeeding installment of taxes is not paid by the last date of the respective installment period or periods as they occur, then the whole tax or remaining unpaid balance of the tax, as may be the case, as the case may be, shall immediately become due and payable and carry until a collected penalty at the rate of 12% per annum. Provided, however, that the option to pay said taxes in equal quarter installments shall not apply to any tax levied in the amount not in excess of $100, in which case the tax shall be payable in a single installment. Whenever there is a subsequent adjustment to said assessments because of a new construction or damaged or destroyed buildings, the resulting addition or decrease in taxes shall be administered, due, payable, and collectible in accordance with sections 44-5-13.13 and 44-5-13.14 of the general laws of Rhode Island, as amended, and any ordinance of the town of Portsmouth. Be it ordained further that the town council of the town of Portsmouth at a regular town council meeting on the 26th of June 2023 hereby orders that the tax assessor of this town shall assess and apportion a property tax on the inhabitants and the rateable real estate and tangible personal property of the town of Portsmouth as of the 31st day of December 2022 at 12 o'clock midnight, according to law. Assess and apportion adjustments to the property tax on new construction or removal of damaged or destroyed buildings in the town of Portsmouth, according to law. Ordained that the budget amended carrying a gross appropriation of $71,431,755, together with the following order and the accounting of refunds, state aid, federal aid, or other credits not specifically stated in the foregoing budget, that the town treasurer be directed to credit such funds to the department concerned, and such funds are hereby appropriated by the town council at a regular meeting on June 26, 2023 for the use of departments concerned, provided, however, that such receipts for the school department budget be accepted. Ordained that the town treasurer is authorized on behalf of the town of Portsmouth to issue notes in anticipation of the receipt of taxes levied in this fiscal year as authorized by section 45-12-4 of the Rhode Island General Laws 1956, as amended, the outstanding principal amount, which at any one time shall not exceed the amount permitted by section 45-12-4 of the Rhode Island General Laws 1956, as amended. The notes shall be signed by the town treasurer in their capacity as the director of finance and countersigned by the president of the town council. The notes shall contain such conditions and details and bear such date or dates and mature at time or times from the date of issuance as the town treasurer may determine. Ordained that the books and accounts of all departments handling town funds be audited by the State Bureau of Audits or by an independent certified public accountant for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. Ordained further that all monies collected by the town clerk and the tax collector be turned over to the town treasurer monthly or at more frequent intervals as accumulations may warrant. Gross appropriation, $71,431,755. Less estimated school receipts / state aid, $6,846,346. Less estimated miscellaneous general fund receipts, $2,941,129. Leaving to be raised by taxes, $61,644,280. Less estimated prior years and prorated collections of $1,365,000. Plus estimated uncollectible spread, $1,624,987. Maximum tax levy, $61,904,267. Kevin M. Aguirre, Town Council President.
Well said, Jen. I just want to make one slight correction.
Go for it.
It was up in the second paragraph, total taxes prior to any adjustments for subsequent increases or decreases in assessments shall be the sum not more than 61,904,267. 61,000 was
I know,
great,
it sounds
but
good, but
we were
yeah.
going to come up short.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jen. Okay. I gotta sign that, huh? All right. We are moving on now to new business. Number one, it's request additional funds of $55,594 for an upgraded motor to the new fire engine. And Chief Ford will explain the request.
Council President, members of the council. Actually, I won't explain the
Okay.
request. I have to say, in my career as a fire chief, I've bought no less than 24 vehicles. And we live in some strange times right now. In the past, it was always about finding the money to purchase it. We never worried about being able to get the product. And things have just changed tremendously. I've always taken the stance that when it's an apparatus, even a vehicle that I'm not going to be operating, I have a committee. I let those have a say who are going to be working on that vehicle. When I came to Portsmouth, I brought to the attention of the town administrator that I did have a past relationship with a particular manufacturer. Because that was completely ceased, I was okay to participate, but as an extra step, I stay out of it. With the apparatus being purchased, I have a committee. Chief Ty and I get together, form a committee, and I'll tell them how much we can spend, and then the decision is theirs. Ultimately, that committee brings a decision to Chief Ty, and then he gives me a recommendation, which I agree with his recommendation, but I'm going to let him speak to because he's had more of the conversations with the manufacturer and exactly what's going on in the world that brings us to where we are today.
Thank you, Chief Ford.
Good evening. Thank you. We sent you in the information. We ordered this fire truck in November, beginning of December 2021. Typically, it would never take this long to get a truck. And we don't need to talk about all the ramifications why. So where we're at right now is it is a problem with motor production. The manufacturer, we provided you with the accompanying information. They're not sure they can get the motor that was originally spec'd in the truck almost 2 years ago when we designed the specs before it went out to bid. At the time, the town awarded the bid to Bulldog fire apparatus for $596,000. With this motor change order, which would come out of our apparatus replacement account, that we set aside the money from the ambulance billing money, so it wouldn't have an impact on necessarily the budget. The truck would be roughly now $652,000. And this same truck today is being bid out by the company around, in the high sevens, if not $800,000 a purchase. The biggest thing for us right now is why we're asking for the change order is because they can put us back in the production line and we'd still be on schedule to get the truck by the end of the year, which took 2 years to get. We're running our 1989 Maxim engine as one of the primary pieces right now, because one of our other engines, the 2011 engine, is having to have the motor rebuilt. So the fleet isn't in the greatest of shape. We're getting the job done, certainly, but we would appreciate your consideration in approving this change order.
Thank you.
I'd motion we approve the extra money needed to change the engine. Of course, this is gonna delay other purchases further on down the line of other equipment, right?
Yeah, we have our apparatus replacement account. So the one good thing is ambulance revenue has been up, and not necessarily good because we have more patients, but certainly we've seen an increase in that line item. So yeah, I'm sure that we'll rearrange and what's next to get purchased.
Mr. President, I'd second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
7-0. Tell them get it here as quick as we can. I know it's 2 years in the making.
Thank you.
If I may just add, as far as the fund goes, what I've used the phrase here many times, it's an evolving fund. When I ordered my latest car, it came in less than I had planned. So that all that does is make what we have left over, it grows. A new assistant chief's car was bought. Same thing happened. Now, when we have other expenses that go up, we look at our rebuilds, our refurbishes that we've talked about, and instead of maybe allocating 200, we say, okay, we got to cut that back now because of this engine. So we're always adjusting. We're not just getting hit with the increases. We look at it and say, where can we save now? Because I projected out, as you have seen, for at least 15 years. So if I just plug that money in and I start seeing negatives, I know I have to adjust elsewhere. Thank you.
Keep working the plan. Okay. All right. The next item, it's a request to purchase two 2023 Ford Police Interceptor utility vehicle all-wheel drive vehicles using funds from the Emergency Vehicle Apparatus Capital Program in the amount of $157,442.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Again, I'm here tonight to request the funds from the Emergency Capital Program that was established that we just talked about with concerning with Chief Ford on the amount of $157,442. That would account for the purchase of two 2023 Ford Police Interceptor utility vehicles to use on patrol.
Motion to approve. Just a quick question. When do you get these?
I'm still waiting for some that we ordered last June,
That's what I thought.
unfortunately.
So it's the supply issue, but
Oh, yeah.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
7-0.
I just may observe, this is a fund that was put in place by the council 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
This was our first, fiscal 23 is the first year.
Right.
But that's my point is, it's working.
Yes.
All right. Next item. Hold on, I just lost my agenda.
Number 3.
We're on to the public hearing for a community development block grant. Ms. Hitchin?
Good evening, members of the council. Would you like to read the public hearing community development block grant application This is to review, prioritize, and approve of proposed activities and programs for inclusion in the town's application for a small cities community development block grant application.
We had, what, it was five requests, five specific.
Within your packet, you have various attachments, which include the legal ad for the program year 2022 CDBG funds, which I'll just quickly review for those that don't see it. There's two public facilities requests. One is to funding to acquire the senior center condominium component, which we're calling the Aid Bethune House Project, a combination of 54 residential senior affordable housing units and a new senior center located at 110 Bristol Ferry Road, which everybody's very familiar with. The second one is another public facilities project funding for the replacement and or upgrade of the heating system at Quaker Manor 4, owned by the Portsmouth Housing Authority, with 40 elderly housing units, which is located at 2368 East Main Road. Then we have two public service projects, which is for outside agencies. One is to provide funding to Three Angels Fund, which is rental assistance to local cancer patients who are experiencing homelessness and or are low mod income residents of Aquidneck Island. The fourth is another public service that has been on Aquidneck Island for quite a number of years, to the housing hotline, to continue to provide emergency housing in local motels to homeless persons when there's no other options available. So I am asking you to review, prioritize, and approve the proposed activities and programs for inclusion into this year's town's CDBG application, which is an annual application that the town does. With me, I also have Robert Plain from Church Community Housing. He is in the room if you have any questions for myself or Mr. Plain.
Yes.
If it's appropriate, I would move that we approve the request for the grants
It's public
in
hearing
the
first.
order, no?
It's a public hearing first, so we gotta take comments.
Oh, please.
We have to take comments,
All right.
and then we'd have to close the public hearing first.
Just a point of note, there are letters of support in your packet from Representatives McGraw, Senator Ujifuja, Chairman Seveny, who is the chairman of the Portsmouth Housing Authority. There's some backup regarding what Housing Hotline is, as well as the Three Angels Fund.
So just want to open it up to the public. It is a public hearing. If there are any comments on the CDBG block grant application, now would be your opportunity. Anything online? Nothing online?
No.
Okay, so we
I
would
would
need
move approval of.
You're still gonna close the public
Close
hearing first.
Public hearing first. That's what he meant. He meant to say close the public hearing. Okay, I don't want to
Motion,
put words.
motion to close the public hearing.
Excuse me, before we close it,
Second.
do we ask questions first or after we
Yeah.
close it?
No, if you have a question.
I
a hearing,
I would like to ask some questions before we close. it, if
Yeah.
you would. Okay. Right now with this senior center. From what I understand, and I'm newly elected to that as a liaison. I'd rather ruin their day sooner than later, if it need be, but they are of the impression that they're going to get their facilities for the same price that they pay now to the town, which I understand they tell me is $1. Is that still something that we're considering doing?
There's been no discussion up to this point of that changing.
Okay, thank you. Second question, the 1.25 million for the so-called condominium. Is that their facility, one of the units plus all the amenities for the senior center?
That's correct. It was outlined, you don't have the drawing. But as you described, there is a senior center facility, and then there is the condo, which would be purchased through CDBG grant funding that would establish office space for the senior center.
Okay, great.
Now, you said amenities.
Well, when
You mean furnishing of it?
No,
Oh, all right,
no.
just, I just
the
wanted to
senior
clarify.
center, yes, good point. Senior center proper
Yes.
is a good way to put it. Thank you, Mr.
Yep.
President.
Nope.
Okay, regarding the facilities at Quaker Manor. Are we in the process of selling that? Or is, I don't even know if the town of Portsmouth owns it. Is the current ownership in the process of selling the facilities to somebody else?
It's in the process of being turned over to, I forget the name of it, Phoenix Housing, from the Portsmouth Housing Authority. I believe that I don't know if anybody's here to speak to that. But as part of the condition of that sale, as Phoenix takes over, there is considerable debt and considerable capital needs that will have to be addressed. So they're working that through PUD. And that will be the condition of the transfer of the property, as I understand it.
Right.
But it's not owned by the town, it's owned by Portsmouth Housing Authority.
But the stipulation of sale doesn't require new heating systems, or is that just a thought that we need heat for certain
No,
individuals over there? I know it's been a problem in the past.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's not, it says Portsmouth Housing Authority and people think that it's ours. So we took a number of the emails. It was brought to my attention earlier in the year that there is a significant problem with the heating system. So I brought that issue to the Portsmouth Housing Authority. And we thought that this might be a good synergy. This is a project that would be eligible under the CDBG block grants. There's not that many things that the town is eligible for under the new rules of the CDBG because we're not as rural and we're not as depressed. But this certainly is one of the projects that would meet the requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. One more question. Regarding the funding for the housing hotline in Newport County. Will our sister towns be supplying an equal amount of money? Do you have any feel for that at all?
I don't, we can ask Mr. Blaine.
Just need name and
So
address.
my name is Bob Plain. I work for Church Community Housing Corporation, and we help Leah administer the CDBG fund for the town of Portsmouth. And the answer is no. And the reason the housing hotline is applying through Portsmouth and not in Newport, where it happens to be located, is the housing hotline puts up people in motels when there isn't shelter space from all over Aquidneck Island. And so each community is only allowed to apply for 2 public service awards. And sometimes the housing hotline applies through Newport and sometimes through Middletown. And this year it happened to work out. Leah and her counterparts in Middletown and Newport and I had a meeting, and this was just the easiest way to do the most amount of good for the most amount of public service agencies on Aquidneck Island for the housing hotline to apply through Portsmouth. And you don't have to worry about it because there's no maintenance of effort when it comes to CDBG money. So you don't have to apply for it again next year.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I will be supporting this, Mr. President.
Okay. So I think that that might be the last of the comments. So now would be a good opportunity to get a motion to.
I already made a motion to close the public
He
hearing.
he made a motion, but we can get a second. Just
So we did. A motion to close the hearing.
Thanks, we have a
Well,
motion.
actually, Mr. Gleach had interrupted at that point and said, wait a second.
All right, so we have a motion and a
I
second.
want to do the second again.
We're gonna move this. Motion
on
and
the
a
safe
second.
side.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0 to close the hearing now.
President, I would move that we approve the request for the CDBG in the numeration as was presented.
Second.
in The motion.
Thank you.
That was it.
Second, but you already did.
With the priorities as presented.
All those, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right. Now we have the resolution. Okay, so Now it's number 4 is the resolution of the
Yeah,
town council.
motion to approve the resolution for the community development block grants.
Second.
I think we could spare you the having to
Thank
read
you.
it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, let's move on to new business number
Thank
5.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Um,
Request to advertise, Mr. President.
Yep.
I would move that we advertise for the request.
Jen, what are we looking at sometime in
We're looking at the July 10th.
July 10th?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you have a motion and a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, now we're gonna, another public hearing is to consider a proposed amendment to chapter 45 of the personnel article, section 14B, prohibited activities.
Thank you for there's a public hearing. I don't know if there'll be any comments. It's pretty straightforward. This language is actually verbatim reflected in state law already. But it seemed appropriate to include it in our local personnel ordinances as well.
Second.
Well, it's a public hearing, so. Anyone wishing to comment on this ordinance? Now is your opportunity. If you have any comments on the ordinance. Okay, going once. Nobody.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, so. public
Motion
hearing's
to
closed.
approve the ordinance
Second.
As amended.
as presented, as amended,
As presented.
as presented.
That's presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, next we have a public hearing. The night of public hearings to consider a proposed amendment to chapter 405 zoning, article 6, non-standard development, section C, alteration of non-conforming development.
Good evening, everyone. Court Chappelle, our office is 171 Chase Road. This was on the agenda. It's really just part of me being in front of zoning and spotting an issue for some people. Understand your zoning ordinance generally allows non-conforming uses. A non-conforming use is merely a commercial use in a residential zone, but it's also more often than not in the town of Portsmouth, residential use in a commercial zone. It happens all up and down East Main Road, and it happens all on Park Avenue. Non-conforming uses are designed by their own existence to go away. And they go away by not being able to enlarge them, not being able to expand. So the non-conforming business in a residential zone seeks another place. But houses don't seek another place, and I'm not sure we want them all to seek another place. So the particular one that came in front of me was the end of Park Avenue, right where the last house that turns, the last property of commercial turns in the first property that's residential. Under our existing ordinance, if you want to add a deck or expand a non-conforming use, and that includes a residential use in a commercial zone, you have to go before the zoning board to get a special use permit. That means it's a conditional use, but you satisfy the board that it's not going to affect the neighborhood, that it's going to still continue to be a good neighbor. It's a great standard and it's perfect. But if it's a non-conforming use, you can't get a variance. So the way our ordinance reads is you can go in front of the zoning board, but if you need 1 more foot of square footage for lot coverage, or if you need to be 6 inches closer to the lot line than in the commercial zone, not the equivalent residential zone, in the commercial zone, well, you can't do it. So it hasn't always been interpreted that strictly in front of the zoning board, but recently it has, and I think it has a lot to do with expanding some Airbnb type stuff. So my client goes to add a garage that ends up 1 foot or 2 closer to the property line. She was granted unanimously by the board a special use permit, but denied the dimensional variance because of authority. So we looked at other ordinances, including Middletown, including Tiverton and Little Compton, many have exceptions for residential expansion, treating residential expansion in non-conforming differently than commercial expansion, and saying you can go to a special use permit. You're not granting permission to do anything. You're granting permission to ask. So if you pass this, those people in town that have a residential building in a commercial or industrial zone that want to expand or put a deck have to satisfy the special use permit. But if they also are too close to a lot line or something, a lot coverage that is an issue with the zoning ordinance, can say, can we also attempt to demonstrate to you that we satisfy the variance criteria of least relief necessary, more than a mere inconvenience? To deny the same would be denying the beneficial use of the property. So it just allows that. We did have a positive response at the planning board. John Borden, I don't know if he's on, was prompted this because after he voted yes on the special use permit and no on it, said, go change the law and I'll be there to help you. And then as always, the planning board, your planning department has been a great help in helping to draft it and considering it, and I believe is passing favorably on it, mainly because they had a lot of input in it.
I was gonna say that I support the ordinance. Court had to take it for me, yes. But I do support, we've been working on it collaboratively. It is a good modification to the zoning ordinance. Planning staff did look at other other properties that have this similar situation that Attorney Chappelle was looking at. There's about 40 to 50 other properties that court has been working with. So we could see this coming up again.
Those of you who know the history of Portsmouth zoning know that almost all the main roads, they just went down. And if you abutted east, west, or park, I believe you were all zoned light industrial or commercial. And that was zoning in 1966. Okay, and most of the people didn't want to change it because at the time, commercial and light industrial were considered more valuable. I don't know if that would still be true. The burden that Mr. Chappelle talks is an insurmountable burden. That is, currently interpreted as an insurmountable burden, and quite frankly, that's probably a correct view of the law. You cannot give a dimensional variance with a use variance. So this really, I think, eliminates, and I will note for the record, I'm fairly certain my house fits this category down in Island Park. I'm on Park Avenue, and I think it's I didn't even think about it, but I think it's zone commercial. So, and that's why I still have the taps open every once in a while. Keith, you want to come down for a beer? I only charge $2.50. Kevin, I charge $1.50 because he's used to the club. But anyway, so I believe that this really makes an awful lot of sense. And I actually almost would like to see us not require somebody to go through a zoning board process. But I actually talked to Mr. Chappelle at one point about this, and he mentioned that it might still be a good idea to limit any real excesses. So I think it's a very good idea.
I would agree. And I think, there's two protections here. It is limited to single family residential, and it does require, a special use permit from the board of review. So there is an opportunity there for the board to weigh each application on its own merits. So I do think this is a good thing. I think I dealt with my fair share of these on the zoning board.
Public hearing.
All a public hearing. So any other comments from the citizens? Are there any?
I'm gonna do this right. Is it my turn? I'd like to close the public hearing, Mr. President.
Second.
It's close enough. We have a motion and a second to close. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Now what do we do? I'd like to move the proposal as outlined in Mr. Chappelle's letter.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to number 8. Discussion action to support, not support Little Compton's resolution supporting the exploration of an overland route for the offshore wind turbines.
Mr. President, could I just a point of order? Or I am going to recuse myself. The only next item I believe is correspondence, which is nothing really. When I go home.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you, sir. I am recusing myself as there is a possibility that they might want to pay me some money today.
We just have to wait for Mr. Levesque to.
Yeah, I apologize. Go sit down.
Just be a couple of minutes, folks.
Good night, Chuck.
Okay, Mr. Gleason.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Would clarify a couple things before we start here. This didn't come out quite the way we expected. And I explained it to the last council that at our May 25th workshop, we had a little mix up on the paperwork that was handed by Counselor, can you pronounce his name? The councilman from Little Compton, Mataronis, I believe. Gary. So we've already heard a resolution or seen in correspondence, a resolution from the town of Little Compton regarding wind turbines, farms in general, if you will, that are being posed to be built out in the Atlantic off the shores of Martha's Vineyard, Little Compton, et cetera. And the intent here was to get his resolution regarding the potential of a cable that would run down the Secana River before this council for a vote to support or not support it. When I gave the information to the town clerk, I asked specifically for discussion action to support, not support Town of Little Compton, February 9th, 23 resolution, and included my emails as backup. Came out a little bit different as discussion action to support, not support Little Compton's resolution supporting the exploration of an overland route for the offshore wind turbines, which is in fact mentioned in the resolution. But I want to just bring this up to everybody's attention. So we are focusing on just the portion of the, of the viewpoint of what South Coast Wind is proposing regarding cables coming down the Secana River. So I'd like to share my thoughts and comments on that. If you'd bear with me a minute. Little Compton shares many concerns about a high voltage cable running by their shoreline into the waters of Tiverton and Portsmouth. Will there be any short or long-term issues or problems with two pairs of cables carrying up to 1,200 megawatts each at 345,000 volts DC? Maybe. The answer is we don't know for certain. Will the output of South Coast Wind's 147 wind turbines all go to Brayton Point in Somerset, Massachusetts? We don't know. If the Falmouth site doesn't work out, we don't know. What we do know is that 2,400 megawatts of power is destined for Brayton Point, and this energy will generate an electromotive force, EMF, commonly known as. Not unlike the EMF generated by the 115,000 volt AC overhead cables that supply power to Aquinic Island. Except essentially we are looking at 3 times the voltage. one being AC, one being direct current, DC. We also know that the Secana River is one, if not the only class one, the cleanest body of water in the state of Rhode Island, supporting many species of finfish and shellfish commercially and recreationally. Do we know with certainty what the effects of digging and burying these high voltage cables and the effects of EMF will be? Are there plans to take precautions with the installation? I would assume yes. But what are the guarantees that the river remains in pristine condition without affecting the finfish and shellfish? We don't know. We do know that South Coast Wind has explored other routes for the high voltage cables that circumvent the Secana River. We know that the Little Compton resolution supports an overland cable path alongside Massachusetts Route 88 in Westport, Massachusetts, making its way to Brayton Point. Further, we know that Save the Bay, including gentlemen Topher Hamblett and Mike Jarboe, have asked South Coast Wind for documentation exploring routes other than the Secana River Bridge. And as of last week, no data has been provided. I believe in supporting Little Compton's resolution. The town of Portsmouth would be adding more information to its own due diligence as outlined and stated in its own resolution from September of 2022. If I could just highlight a couple of the sections of each resolution. The town of Little Compton, while they have specifically said, therefore be it resolved that the Little Compton Town Council supports the exploration of a cable path alongside State Route 88 in Westport, Massachusetts, which would carry none of the attendant risks of the current plan, that being the cable down the river, and traverses an area relatively free of private residents or businesses. I think that's a great idea, but I'm not restricting. It's not my job to restrict South Coast Wind, and there may be other options. If I recall, when they presented to the public, they had reviewed up to 18 different options. We are just looking at one option that I'm aware of. Just want to highlight one section here in our own resolution presented by, I think you presented, Keith. And it goes to September of 2022. Now therefore be it resolved that the town council intends to further review and conduct due diligence to fully evaluate the Mayflower Wind proposal, its impact on the town, and to assess the costs and benefits associated with this project, so as to establish the town's position on this project in order to advise the Energy Facility Siting Board at the appropriate time in their proceedings. And be it further resolved that the town council approves the hiring of legal services and consultants to deem necessary to help protect the interests of the town and protect its property, its natural resources, and its citizens. Town has started that process, and I think what Little Compton is trying to do is what we should also do. That's just my viewpoint on it, why I brought this forward, and I'm welcome to hear any arguments pro or con, but I would love to hear the arguments for running this cable up the river, because to me, I think there are better options. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, I think your resolution is whether or not your item is whether or not we support Little Compton's resolution.
Correct.
So, I mean, let's stick to that point, but I would also like to just take a step back. The person who spoke at our workshop identified himself as a member of the Little Compton Town Council, and he read this verbatim that night. So we're all aware of the town of Little Compton's position, along with the questions. And you also know, counselors know, we discussed this at the workshop, that that any action, the topic of South Coast Wind has been discussed in executive session by the Portsmouth Town Council. Okay, so it, in my opinion, should not be discussed any further in open session until the discussions in executive session come to a conclusion. And we've stated, whatever happens in executive session, any final determination, any final decision will be discussed in a public meeting in open session. So I think at this point, it's premature to really discuss this in open session because we've already said there's executive session discussion. So I don't see how the town council can do anything in open session. And we stated that in the workshop. This is not a public hearing. The applicant has not come before us with a formal proposal. So we've stated this time and again. We stated it during the workshop. There is no formal proposal to the town from South Coast Wind. So it's an executive session matter. We've been very straightforward that anything that we discuss in executive session, if a decision is to be made, that decision will be made in open session in a public meeting. There is no deal. There's no deal in place. We've stated that.
There's no proposal.
There's no proposal. And so really any discussion at this point, in my mind, to take action for or against, could have impact discussions that are intended for executive session. And I think we all know that. So I really think it's premature for us to even have this discussion tonight in open session. That's my opinion as counselor. No,
So I'm not allowed to speak though? I'm not allowed to speak?
I'm asking
make a
counselors,
statement? Can I make?
when it's time, just sit tight for a second. Are there any motions from counselors? Any comments from counselors?
I agree.
I mean, if at some point in the future, we may even be in a position to be negotiating with South Coast Wind on their proposals. If we announce ahead of time that we are restricting what they can propose to us, that may put us into an awkward position when we're actually supposed to be getting the best deal for the town that we can get. I don't have, well, that's our job. That's our job. So we are not here to negotiate for Little Compton. Although we love Little Compton, and it's a great place, but it is not our job to represent Little Compton's interests. It's to represent the town of Portsmouth. And as of right now, we have, this is not public, yelling back and forth time.
Right.
We have not yet even entered into any negotiations with South Coast Wind because they haven't proposed anything to us. So we do not want to weigh in on this topic until we know what they're proposing. And when they do propose something, we will immediately bring it before the citizens of Portsmouth and see what the citizens of Portsmouth want us to do. And I will tell you, there are many people who have very strong feelings about this in both directions. There are many people who feel very, very strongly that
Folks,
the
please.
people in this room may have their own opinions, but I can tell you, I've talked to a number of other people who are equally residents of Portsmouth who have different opinions about the desirability of wind power and the necessity to get it implemented in some fashion. But as of right now, there is no proposal from South Coast. There is no negotiation going on. And to sort of announce conditions and restrictions on what we think they can and can't propose before they even proposed it is premature and may limit our ability to negotiate with them when they actually start proposing things. That's my opinion on it.
Mr. Katz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for Mr. Rayner. My understanding, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we could adopt a resolution to tell South Coast Wind to go jump in a lake or a river. Under no circumstances do we like them, for whatever reason you want, power lines, Scana River. We could pass a resolution that says, and the state EFSB could approve the project anyway. Is that true?
That is correct.
And so therefore, we would be in a position to have to seek some sort of accommodation because or negotiate a host community agreement at that time when we actually know what the proposal might be, which we do not know now. And they'd say, why would we negotiate with you? The FSB already approved it. You get nothing. Because, you know, we're going to tear up your roads. I don't care. Whatever it is. We have to maintain a position of neutrality until a proposal is in front of us, and then we can address the details of it. And maybe we weigh in against it at that time. But now it is just premature. I'd also just like to address the issue of, I know this is a side issue, but the issue of correspondence being on our agenda or not on our agenda. This resolution from Little Compton concludes with, now therefore be it resolved, yada, yada, cable path, Route 88, period, voted this day of. That's it. But we have other resolutions from the town of Little Compton that say, be it resolved, they're opposed to construction. And be it further resolved that copies of this resolution, I'm reading from one, be sent to the clerks of all cities and towns in Rhode Island and to the Little Compton members of the Rhode Island General Assembly and so on. The town council of the town of Little Compton knows how to send correspondence to other municipalities. Look in our own agendas for links to resolutions from other cities and you'll see that. So what I'm saying is I am defending our town clerk for somehow not having a resolution and I don't want you to think that something was done wrongly when the resolution was never sent to the town, as resolutions are always done. You can, like I said, look at our correspondence. Be it further resolved, send it to the clerks of all cities and towns. Having a council member come to our workshop, great, we want to hear from everybody. But then handing the piece of paper of what his remarks were to somebody sitting up here, that's not correspondence. So I'm glad it got straightened out. I'm glad it's correspondence. But I hope you, and I don't mean to address you directly, but I hope you accept that there was no nefarious goings on. It wasn't properly sent as correspondence. Now it is.
And before you go any further, I'm not insinuating that at all. It was just a mix up. And that's the calamity here that I like to think, see and put things on the agenda that are in black and white. And they were gray, you know. But I would like to say you've kind of answered your own question in a lot of ways. I can understand there have been executive sessions here. There's no doubt about it. But the resolution is just asking South Coast Wind to look at other alternative overland routes. Okay, we of Portsmouth should say to them, look at another place. Is there a better way? Save the Bay is saying the same thing. We don't want to ruin a river. We don't know what's going to happen. It's not. I can understand your viewpoint. I like to get to the point. I'll make a motion and people have the choice to vote it down. People will understand where we're coming from. But I don't think we're telling South Coast Wind, we're done with you. We're saying, hey, have you looked anywhere else? And maybe it's $50 million more to do that. And that's the reason why they're coming down the river. I would suspect that's the case.
I would point out,
the
Mr.
dollar.
Gleason, you already told us that they have considered numerous routes for these cables. So they are already, we know that they're considering many different routes. So it's not like they're only
They're not-
looking at the Secana.
They're not considering them anymore because they have one final route they've picked out.
Now, it's,
But
that
they
would be
did-
the first
They
we've
did
heard
the
about it.
homework to look at others from what
Yeah.
Save the Bay has researched and told the general public.
We have not been informed of that situation.
I
Sorry.
think well, okay, first of all, we're not gonna, this isn't a shout in match from the back audience, okay? You know, we had that at the workshop where people, again, wanted to just, shout from the audience, please. We're not gonna do that. As far as the application goes, there are multiple agencies that are experts on what happens to the Secana River, far more informed and educated than the town council. Okay, so it's up to those agencies as well to do their due diligence. I'm sure that there are public comment periods. I'm sure there are opportunities for you to voice your concerns at those hearings as well. This is a long process. So again, I think even having this discussion tonight is premature. It's not in our, we've already stated this. We've had topics of this discussion under executive session. Anything beyond that, it's borderline on, crossing the line of what's discussed in executive session, and I'm not going there. And I think if, Mr. Gleason, if you've made up your mind, that's fine. But for the rest of us, I do not want this getting dragged out into the court of public opinion, which is what is exactly happening here tonight. So no decision has been made, no proposal has been submitted. There's not much else to really discuss. And I know a lot of you had your opportunity at the public workshop to express your concerns. We've stated it. They still have to come before us. When they do that, then you're going to have another opportunity to come. I'm almost sure that if I allow you to speak tonight, you're going to tell me about all the reasons why this shouldn't come up the Secana River and all of that. And I don't I don't diminish that.
I'm not going to. I've been sitting here doing everything you asked me to and every single time.
Okay, so
I'm not going to do that.
but here's what happened. When this came up a couple of meetings ago, people paraded up to the line, spoke, even when I tried to get order and stop it, they just kept talking over me.
Okay.
And so that was, if I open the door, that's what's going to happen.
Well,
Right?
I have the right also.
I know you do, but we
So I'd like
as a
to say-
council have not got to that point yet.
Okay, I'll wait.
So is there any further conversation, discussion from council members?
My only issue with the current setup of this agenda item is I don't have a resolution from the town of Portsmouth to vote on. So I don't know what I'm voting on. So unless there's a specific resolution, because the information put forth by the Little Compton is obviously different than.
So
She's got bird phone. That's neat. There's nothing really to vote on. Normally, when a resolution is put forth or pulled off a correspondence, it's turned into a Portsmouth resolution with Portsmouth language in it. And then it's something to vote on. I have nothing to vote on. South Coast has explored other routes. They've mentioned it at all the hearings. I have gone to every single one of the things that they've put on at Common Fence Point, out in Little Compton, the one that was put up. It's been explored. Us asking them to do it again is really not going to do anything. Let's call a spade a spade. It's not going to do anything, but possibly damage any negotiating position that we might have.
And I appreciate that. So if I promise I'm not going to turn this into a fight.
And I will let you speak, but what I'd like to, if you're going to speak, the focus is on the Little Compton resolution, not the town of Portsmouth. It's the Little Compton resolution to explore an optional overland route.
Right, I'm just going to make a statement.
Sure.
Right, because of something that you said, by the way, Ralph Kraft, 2327 East Fayette Road, right? Sorry, I almost feel, right?
We know you.
I know, and I appreciate it. And thank you, by the way, for all your time you spent at the workshop and everything you're going through. Thank you, Mr. Gleason. I appreciate this. And you see the passion, and I also understand that there are other people that have the opposite opinion. That is why we have a town council and why America is what it is. Okay. That being said, this is something that you brought up, and I'm going to say this, and I have. Town of Portsmouth has received $100,000 from South Coast. It's public record. A lot of people don't know that. We spent approximately $22,000 exploring what we don't know, because you're an executive council, and I appreciate it because it's a business deal. I'm a businessman. You're going to do what you consider to be best. This is where you're in a tough situation. I do appreciate that. All right. And you seem to be moving forward, although we may disagree. But you have received that money. We have spent approximately $22,000 on some form of test, but the total amount of money spent by the town of Portsmouth is approximately just under $108,000. So we're already $8,000 in the hole for something that may not happen. That's the first thing, and we'll leave it alone. Two, I have asked for the reports on what has happened from way back when it was Mayflower in this room on the environmental studies. And last month, they still couldn't give me any environmental studies. So I hope that that money that you're doing is being spent on environmental studies. And that's it. I appreciate your time.
So, Mr. Kraft, when you're with your follow-up on the environmental studies, are you also reaching out to the permitting agencies that are actually going to be responsible for whether or not those cables go up to Secana, CRMC?
Yeah,
That's,
I understand a lot of the problems that may occur with this with CMRC. I understand that, yes, you're right, that we may not have any control over this happening. All right, I do know that. At the same time, if we're just gonna take a deal because they're gonna shove it. For those of you who know me, it's really hard not to finish that, okay? That's unacceptable. What I've asked in the past is that even if we don't make out that we're not complicit with what's wrong for our town and our constituents. I appreciate it.
yes, my comment is, so you have asked, you have also.
Oh,
followed up.
I,
No, I just.
yes, I have been in contact. I also understand the politicalness that is involved there. I've also talked with multiple different organizations, right? I'm trying to find out and get the answers. And as I've said in the past, now that's why I'm not trying to go here.
I believe at the public workshop, questions were asked. We do not have those responses.
That's it.
So
I
so we will,
was able to say what I want to say and I appreciate it.
thank you.
Perfect. All right.
We've already strayed way off the agenda item, actually.
Yeah.
So-
See that? I'm already,
Just
so
not gonna
it's
read-
got to refer to.
I won't relitigate, but I do want to clarify a couple of things because
Is it relate to the ordinance?
it relates to the ordinance
Okay.
because
The resolution, I'm sorry.
the resolution, this is why I believe it's important
Excuse me, sir.
for
I'm sorry.
Joe Forgione, 28 at Quinnipiac Ave, why it's important that we state something to South Coast Mayflower, because they believe their biggest ally in getting this up to Secana is the Portsmouth Town Council. They actually believe that, okay? I've gone to the hearings at the PUC. I've heard two very brilliant, smart, intelligent people, Keith and Dr. Ryan, say something which is patently incorrect, okay? They have not seriously evaluated any other alternative. If you read the BOEM,
You put a disclaimer on it. They have evaluated.
it is a hand wave.
Okay,
And my
but that's
grandfather
fine.
would say, what turnip
We're getting
did
off-
we fall off of?
But
All
what
right.
I said
Because-
was not patently
Here we go.
false. So
It's,
it's not.
it
patently
doesn't
false.
pass any
Okay,
smell test.
But we
Okay.
still need to stick to what. the
And if we go
resolution
back
is
and we
requesting.
say whatever resolution it is, we could have a Portsmouth resolution, we could have a Little Compton resolution. We have to go back to them and say, we seriously, if you want to partner with us, Portsmouth, we want
Okay,
you to
Mr.
seriously
Forgione.
consider and give us
You're-
serious information on
not
other
the issue.
alternatives, which they haven't done.
That's not the issue.
That's
The
the-
issue is whether or not to support Little Compton's resolution, not our own interpretation of the resolution. So, no,
Okay.
that's the
I'm
issue.
going to give you a resolution for the next meeting.
And the
Here's-
Open
here's the
Meeting,
town
the Open
council.
Meetings Act
Yep.
requires the council conduct its business in open in public. It
All right.
does not give any of the members of the public the right to rehash and have another public workshop.
I heard 5 resolutions on the budget created from scratch
All right,
by
you're done,
people
Mr.
on the town
Forgione.
council.
You're
We
going
could
down
do a
another road.
resolution right here. Okay, that's fine. But I'm telling you, if we do not, if we don't ask for information, we are not doing the diligence in the September town council resolution that was approved. Because they haven't.
Okay, all right. We're not gonna go down this road.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Yes, I have to lower this because it's
That's, we all do sometimes, don't worry.
Carol Mello, 158 Massasoit Avenue. I propose that we do adopt a resolution similar to what Little Compton has done. But the most important thing that I've read in any literature is from the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management. And that is this statement. And I'll just read it. And
Did you read this at the workshop?
I don't think so.
You sure? You did a lot.
Okay, all right, so can I read it?
Did you read it at the workshop?
I can't remember if I read the whole thing. Could I read it?
Is it brief?
It's three sentences.
Okay.
Okay, other agencies expenses. Okay. Okay. Then I have to move this out.
It's a directional mic. You have to speak right into the tip of the mic.
Okay. It was developed through scoping process for the draft in response to comments received from the National Marine Fisheries concerning the potential impact of the offshore export cables on fisheries, EFH and habitat areas of particular concern in the Secundit River. The Secundit River supports EFH for 16 fish species, and I know it's a lot more than that, and has been for the summer flounder and Atlantic cod. To address this concern, BOEM developed onshore cable route options that would avoid placing offshore export cable in the Secundit River. I don't know what else you need to. This is so clear that it's such a bad idea. And I understand that you're thinking maybe you don't have any choice because it's going to get thrown down your face anyway, and maybe you try to get some money out of them because you might have some things wrong, but I think we have to be, again, brave, loyal, and true. We have to be brave to say no to them, which they're probably not going to propose again until the beginning of January because they've dropped their
Let's just,
Yeah.
we don't know.
Yeah.
You're straying.
Okay.
Let's just,
Okay, I
Um,
think your point has been, hey, we know where you
yes.
stand on the issue.
Right.
Thank you.
So that's it. That I just wanted to make sure that
Appreciate
you
that.
understood.
Yep.
And that maybe you could read that too. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Counselors?
Thank you for your indulgence here, and I could finish up. I'll finish up anyways, but I will say that if somebody wants to see a resolution, I'll go through that motions again. But at this point, I would just like to make a motion for us to support the town of Little Compton's 2923 resolution about the cable coming up the Secundit River. Kill it without a second. Fine by me. I made the motion.
The motion, no second, so there is no motion. Okay, let's move on to correspondence.
Move to receive and place on file.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Future meetings, our next meeting is July 10th. Our July 24th meeting has been canceled. Then we resume again in August with our August 14th. It's a Tuesday meeting, followed by August 28th.
15.
I'm sorry, August 15th. It's a Tuesday.
Yes. Yeah, so that the VJ Day, Victory Day,
Victory Day. So I
the
do
one, the holiday we only celebrate.
need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
That reflect, I said aye, even though I didn't. I said aye, even though I didn't. I got stuck in the old mode and I was waiting